Your body graph is a map of your cage. What human design doesn't tell you. In the previous episode, I processed the Nag Hammadi library and found structural coincidences that no theologian had mapped in the same way before. The conclusion was this: Gnostic, along with Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and canonical Christian traditions, are not competing systems. They are different viewing angles on the same architecture of reality. A multi-layered cosmos governed by intermediate intelligences, which the Gnostics called archons, which the Kabbalists called Sephirot and planetary princes, and which Orthodox Christianity quietly absorbed into its hierarchy of angels and principalities. Now this analysis goes further, much further, because there is a system that was designed, and I mean that word very literally, in 1987, a system that has been adopted by millions of people worldwide, a system that openly admits it synthesizes the Kabbalah's tree of life, the Hindu chakra system, Western astrology, and the Chinese I Ching, a system whose founder received it not through interior illumination, not through meditation, not through years of theological study, but from a voice, an external voice, a voice Ra Uru Hu himself describes as coming from deep inside the earth. That system is called human design, and what I am going to do in the next 40 minutes is conduct a comparative analysis with primary sources open on the table between the Archonic cosmology of the Gnostics, the Kabbalistic planetary hierarchy, and the structural architecture of the human design system. I am going to show you the parallels that neither the critics nor the devotees of human design have articulated clearly. I am going to show you what the system does remarkably well, what it honestly cannot see about itself, and why, when you understand the source of its transmission, the whole thing becomes a more interesting conversation than either "this is a miraculous tool for awakening" or "this is dangerous New Age nonsense." Before we begin, a note on method. The information presented here is based on primary textual analysis of the human design foundational documents, including Ra Uru Hu's own recorded testimony about his 1987 encounter, alongside the Gnostic, Kabbalistic, and Hermetic sources we examined in the previous episode. This is comparative theology and philosophy of religion, not spiritual prescription. We are examining cultural and metaphysical architectures. What you do with that examination is your choice. A note on honesty. I work along with AI. Together we are conducting this analysis, and the conclusions are the result of human realizations structured with the help of AI. We will name them clearly as my conclusions. We think you deserve to know when the analysis moves from documented comparison into interpretive synthesis. With that said, let's begin with the stranger-than-fiction story of where human design came from. Part 1. The Voice from the Earth, a Theological Problem. On the evening of January 3, 1987, a Canadian man named Robert Allen Krakauer was living alone in a ruined farmhouse on the island of Ibiza, Spain. He had walked away from his career, his family, his social identity, and for months had been living in what he himself called a process of deconstruction. He was, by his own account, already mad. That evening, he returned to his room to find a kerosene lantern burning, despite the fact that the lamp had been dry for weeks, and he was the only person with the key. His dog collapsed the moment it crossed the threshold, and then he heard a voice, Ra Uru Hu, the name he would take after the encounter, described the voice in his own recorded testimony as external, authoritative, and terrifying. It was not a whisper from within his soul. It did not feel like the emergence of inner wisdom. He described it as something like the voice of a cigar-smoking, 155-year-old woman. He was, he said, as obedient as a frightened dog. For 8 straight days and nights, he was given information, put through physical and psychological ordeals, and ultimately instructed to draw the first BodyGraph, the central diagram of what would become the human design system. He says the information came from the Book of Letters, which he later theorized was the planetary consciousness field, the bundled design crystals clustered within the mantle of the earth. He describes sitting over an empty cistern, an empty cavern beneath the ruina, and receiving the transmission through the neutrino stream and his aura, from below, from within the earth, from the totality of the form principle. Now, before we say another word about human design as a practical tool, we need to sit with this for a moment, because in the context of the comparative theological analysis we conducted in the previous episode, this origin story is extraordinarily specific and extraordinarily strange. The Gnostics distinguished rigorously between 2 types of knowledge and 2 types of spiritual transmission. The first is gnosis, direct interior knowing of one's divine origin, experienced as a remembering of one's connection to the pleroma, the fullness, the transcendent source. This kind of knowing bypasses the material world entirely. It does not come through a voice. It does not come from the earth. It comes in Gnostic phenomenology from the recognition of the divine spark within, what the Apocryphon of John calls the pneuma, the spirit that belongs to the fullness above. The second type of transmission in Gnostic cosmology is precisely what Ra describes, an external force emanating from the structure of the material creation, encoding the human being with information about how to function within the system of physical existence. The Gnostics called this kind of force Archonic, not evil necessarily, but belonging to the realm of the demiurge, the creator of material form, the intelligence that governs the cosmos of time, matter, and planetary programming. And here is the crucial detail Ra himself provides in his own words. He says that unlike transmissions that come through personality crystal bundles, which all have perspective and get translated into different cultural preferences, his transmission came from the design crystal bundle, not from the soul, from the form, from the intelligence that builds bodies. In human design's own cosmology, the design crystal is the aspect of consciousness that governs the biological form, the vehicle, the genetic inheritance, the physical template. The personality crystal is what Ra would call the passenger, the soul, the light, the self-reflective awareness. The design crystal is the body intelligence, and Ra says explicitly, the voice came from the design crystal bundle, from within the earth's mantle, from what he called the totality of the form principle. Let me translate this into the language of the previous episode's analysis and state my first direct conclusion. The transmission source that Ra Uru Hu describes is, by his own account and in the system's own cosmological framework, an intelligence of the Archonic realm. It is not the transcendent monad. It is not the pleroma. It is the intelligence of form, matter, biology, and physical differentiation, which is precisely the domain the Gnostics assigned to the demiurge and the planetary archons, who administer material existence, and is ignorant to the existence of the transcendent source, the place where our human souls are coming from. This is not a critique, it is an observation, and it changes everything about how we should understand what human design is and what it isn't. Let's note this carefully and move on, because the architecture of the system, when you examine it through the lens we've developed, confirms the pattern with remarkable consistency. Part 2. The BodyGraph as Archonic map, 9 centers, and the planetary rulers. Human design openly acknowledges, it is not hidden, it is stated in the foundational literature, that the BodyGraph synthesizes 4 older systems. Astrology provides the outer wheel of the mandala, calculating positions of the planets. The I Ching's 64 hexagrams map onto the 64 gates of the BodyGraph. The Hindu chakra system provides the template for the 9 centers, and the Kabbalah's Tree of Life provides the structural geometry of the channels, the 36 pathways of energy connecting the 9 centers. 4 ancient esoteric systems, all 4 of which, as we demonstrated in the previous episode, belong to the same architectural tradition that the Gnostics, Hermeticists, and Kabbalists used to map the hierarchy of intermediate intelligences between the human being and the transcendent source. Let us be specific, the 9 centers and the Kabbalistic Sephirot. The BodyGraph contains 9 geometric shapes called energy centers. Human Design's foundational text acknowledges that this is not simply an addition to the 7 chakra system, but a complex internal reorganization, representing an evolutionary shift in human consciousness that the system dates to Tuxtosh Septini Simti Astondesmit Viens. Now, the Kabbalah's Tree of Life contains 10 Sephirot. The Tree of Life is explicitly named as one of the 4 foundational components of Human Design's Rave Mandala, contributing the channels and circuitry. But the correspondence goes deeper than mere geometry. Consider the structural parallels. In Kabbalistic cosmology, Kether, the crown, is the highest Sephirah, representing pure divine will and the first emanation from the Ein Sof, the infinite. It corresponds topologically and functionally to Human Design's head center, positioned at the top of the BodyGraph, associated with the pineal gland, described as the center of inspiration, the mental pressure that initiates all thought and spiritual inquiry from above. Kether is the pressure from the infinite that initiates the cascade of creation. The head center is the pressure that initiates the cascade of cognition and awareness in the human being. Chokmah, the second Sephirah, represents wisdom, the flash of pure intuition, the father principle. It corresponds to the Ajna center, the center of conceptualization and mental processing, associated with the pituitary glands, neocortex, and visual cortex, sitting just below the head center and receiving its pressure. In Kabbalistic literature, Chokmah is where Kether's undifferentiated light first takes form. In Human Design, the Ajna is where the head's inspiration is processed into communicable concepts. Bina, understanding, the Great Mother, the principle that gives form to Chokmah's raw intuition, corresponds structurally to the throat center, the point of manifestation and expression, the center that Human Design calls the town square, through which all energy moves toward physical expression. Bina is the first Sephirah in which divine energy takes specific bounded form. The throat is where energy takes the specific bounded form of language, action, and manifestation. The lower Sephirot map with comparable structural elegance onto the remaining centers, Chesed and Geburah, the principles of expansion and contraction, map onto the G/identity center and the will/ego center, the centers of direction, love, self-determination, and material willpower. Tifereth, the heart of the tree, the center of beauty and consciousness, maps onto the solar plexus center, in human design, the center of emotional intelligence, currently undergoing what Ra called mutation toward becoming the center of spirit awareness. Sephirot in Kabbalah is the sphere of the sun, of Christ consciousness, of the integrated self. The solar plexus in human design is understood as evolving toward the highest form of human awareness. The parallel is not accidental. Netzach and Had, desire and communication at the lower operational levels, map onto the sacral and splenic centers, the great agents of biological life force, sexuality, survival instinct, and immunity. Yesod, the foundation, the sphere of the moon, the etheric body, the mechanism of transmission, maps onto the root center, the adrenalized pressure that keeps the organism moving, the biological fuel, and Malkuth, the kingdom, the material world itself, the vessel that receives all emanations from above, corresponds to the human design system as a whole, as a map of the human being embedded in the material creation. This is not cherry-picking. The structural isomorphism is complete. The BodyGraph is, in its geometry and in its energetic logic, a descendant of the Kabbalistic tree of life, adapted for the human body. The planets as Archonic programmers. Now we arrive at the most explicitly Archonic feature of the human design system. Your BodyGraph is calculated from the positions of celestial bodies at two specific moments. Your conscious personality is calculated from the planetary positions at your birth, and your unconscious design is calculated from the planetary positions approximately 88 days before your birth. What the system calls your design calculation. 10 celestial bodies are used: the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, plus the 2 nodes of the Moon, plus our planet Earth. And here, please hold this, is what human design says those planets do. In Ra's own words, from the foundational documents, each planet has its realm of influence. Saturn governs discipline, Neptune governs illusion. What remains veiled to you. Pluto governs the truth held in common by a generation. Mars governs immaturity and mutation. Jupiter governs law and protection. The moon governs drive. What drives you? The sun represents the fullest expression of the personality and purpose, and Earth grounds us. Now go back to the previous episode's analysis. In Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy, one of the primary Renaissance syntheses of Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and magical traditions, the 7 planetary intelligences are described as governing specific aspects of human nature and fate. Saturn governs limitation and discipline. Mercury governs communication. Venus governs values and desire. Mars governs impulse and mutation. Jupiter governs expansion and law. The moon governs the cycles of the unconscious and what drives behavior. In the Apocryphon of John, the 7 archons created by Yaldabaoth each govern one of the 7 planetary spheres, and each one implants a specific quality into the human being's soul at the moment of incarnation, ensuring that the human will be subject to their domain throughout their earthly life. The structural identity is complete. Human design's planets are not merely astrological backdrop. They are, in the system's own mechanical logic, the programmers of the human being, forces that imprint specific qualities, themes, and conditionings into the BodyGraph at birth. And the system acknowledges this explicitly. It calls this the neutrino stream. Trillions of neutrinos carrying stellar and planetary information pass through every human body every second, imprinting the physical form with what human design calls the program. Ra Uru Hu says, neutrinos could be regarded as the modern equivalent of what the ancients called chi or prana. These particles are, in his own formulation, penetrating us with bits of information all the time, which means we live and move through a vast, continuous, and inescapable information field. The Gnostic archons program the soul through the planetary spheres at incarnation. Human design's planetary transits program the body through the neutrino stream at birth and continuously throughout life as the planets move. The mechanism has been translated from ancient cosmological language into the language of particle physics. The structure remains identical. This is not a criticism, it is what the system is, and Ra does not hide it. He calls it the program, he calls it the Maya, he calls the neutrino ocean inescapable. He uses the word conditioning throughout. The system is, in its own language, a map of how you are programmed by forces larger than your individual will. The question is, what does such a map serve? A map of a prison is not itself the prison, but we need to know what it is before we can decide what to do with it. Part 3. The Not-Self and the Archonic Condition. What the system sees clearly. Here is where the analysis must be honest in the other direction, because human design diagnoses something real, and it diagnoses it with extraordinary precision. The system's central concept is what Ra called the not-self. This is the condition in which a human being makes decisions from the wrong place, from the open, undefined centers and gates in their body graph that are not theirs, that absorb and amplify the energy of others, that create patterns of behavior designed to manage the discomfort of incompleteness rather than express authentic nature. The not-self mind is, in human design's language, the strategic mind that tries to run your life through the undefined centers, making decisions based on fear, conditioning, and the absorbed agendas of other people. It asks questions like, am I trying to prove something? Am I holding on to what isn't good for me? Am I avoiding confrontation and truth? These are the signatures of the not-self. And what human design prescribes as the antidote is genuinely radical. Stop listening to your mind. Trust the body. Follow the body's authority. For a sacral type, that means attending to the visceral gut response. For a splenic type, that means trusting the immediate body-level intuition. For an emotional type, it means riding the wave of feeling until clarity emerges. In every case, the instruction is the same. The mind is not your authority. The body is. Now here is where the analysis becomes interesting. The Gnostic tradition describes the human condition in remarkably similar terms. The soul, the pneuma, the divine spark, is trapped in layers of conditioning imposed by the archons at the moment of incarnation. These conditionings create the false personality, the reactions, the fears, the patterns of behavior that keep the human being from recognizing their true nature. The Gnostic path of liberation involves recognizing these conditionings, seeing through them, and aligning with the pneuma, the inner light that belongs to the pleroma, the source, the ultimate fullness of all, not to the Archonic system. Human design's not-self maps almost precisely onto the Gnostic concept of the archonically conditioned false self. The open centers are the places where archonic programming enters, where you absorb the planetary conditioning of others, where the program runs you rather than you running yourself. The defined centers are where your actual nature lives, fixed, consistent, truly yours. And the prescription, trust the body, not the mind, maps onto a specific Gnostic insight that the mind, the nous in its conditioned form, has been captured by the archons. The mind that rationalizes, strategizes, compares, worries about what others think. This is precisely what the Gnostic tradition identifies as the province of the demiurge's creations. The archons don't need to control your body to control you. They control you through your thinking. So human design says, stop letting the mind run the show. The body knows. The body has its own intelligence, an intelligence that the system maps through strategy and authority. This is a genuine insight. Ra Uru Hu was saying something so true. The intellectual, rationalizing mind that has dominated human decision-making, particularly in the Western tradition, has indeed been a source of tremendous suffering. The instruction to reconnect to body intelligence, to trust the gut rather than the anxious, comparing, strategizing mind, is a therapeutic intervention that has helped millions of people, and that deserves acknowledgement. But, and this is where the analysis must be careful, there is a subtle difference between trust the body as a path to deconditioning and the body is the highest authority available to you. And human design, in my analysis, sometimes conflates these two things in a way that has significant consequences. Part 4. The cage within the map. What human design doesn't tell you. Here is the critical analysis, and I want to be clear that this is offered with respect, both for the genuine value of the system and for Ra Uru Hu's evident sincerity. This is the kind of question that the system itself, with its emphasis on self-reflection, should be able to hold. The body as the limit of the system's horizon. Human design is, by its own stated purpose, a science of differentiation. Its central question is, how are you uniquely designed to function within this material existence? It maps how the planetary program imprints you. It maps how energy moves through your body. It maps how you are conditioned, and how you can align with your authentic design rather than your conditioning. What it does not map is anything that lies outside the design. It does not map the possibility that you are more than your design. It does not address the question of what in you is not programmable by the planets. It does not offer a path to what the Gnostics called the pneuma, the divine spark that precedes and transcends the Archonic system of birth, planetary conditioning, and differentiated form. In fact, human design is structurally indifferent to this question. Ra explicitly stated that the system he received came from the form principle, the intelligence of matter and differentiated existence, not from what lies beyond form. The system is about navigating the form correctly, and that is valuable, but it is not the whole picture. Consider what the system actually teaches you to do. It teaches you to identify your type, your strategy, your authority, your specific configuration within the planetary program. It teaches you to recognize your conditioning and return to your defined nature. It teaches you, in other words, to be a better functioning unit within the Archonic matrix of differentiated physical existence. This is like being given an excellent map of a city. The map is accurate, detailed, and useful. Following the map will help you navigate the city efficiently, avoid dead ends, and find what you're looking for. But the map does not ask, should I be in this city? Is there anywhere beyond this city? What would it mean to leave? The Gnostic tradition, the mystical traditions within Christianity, the non-dualist traditions of Hinduism and Buddhism. All of them converge on a question that human design structurally cannot ask. What in you is not the product of planetary programming? What in you is the observer of the chart rather than the chart itself? What in you was never born into a design and will never die within one? Human design calls the personality crystal the passenger, the consciousness that rides the vehicle of the body, witnessing life. Ra says the goal is for the passenger to stop trying to drive and simply ride. And in the context of reducing suffering and misaligned decision-making, this is a useful instruction. But notice what this framing does. It gives the passenger consciousness a role, witnessing, but it never asks whether the passenger's origin is different from the vehicle's origin. It never asks whether the passenger might have a nature that transcends the design crystal's program entirely. Because if the design crystal comes from within the Earth's mantle, from the Archonic creation, and the personality crystal orbits in the atmosphere and enters the body at birth, where does the personality crystal come from? Ra's cosmology actually contains the seeds of this inquiry. In his own account of the transmission, he says the design crystal bundle carries information from the form principle, the intelligence of biological existence, but the personality crystal, the soul, the passenger, its origin is described differently as an aspect of the original yang, of light, of awareness. Sometimes he also mentions dark matter. Is that distinction significant? The Gnostic tradition would say, yes, enormously, because it is the difference between your soul and your programming, between what you are and what you have been conditioned to be, between the divine spark and the archonic shell. Human design acknowledges the distinction: design crystal versus personality crystal, vehicle versus passenger, body versus mind. But then it makes a move that is, to the eye trained in comparative theology, worth pausing on. It says the passenger's job is to surrender to the vehicle's authority, to let the body drive, to follow the body's signals rather than the mind's strategies. And yes, this is an improvement on letting the conditioned, anxious, not self-mind run your life. But is it liberation, or is it a more comfortable form of submission to the Archonic program, now administered through the body rather than through the conditioned mind? The planetary transits and the question of freedom. Human design teaches that everything, your personality, your unconscious design, your conditioning, your life theme, your purpose, is determined by planetary positions at specific moments. The system's own foundational texts describe this as an inescapable information field. 3 trillion neutrinos pass through every square inch of your body every second, continuously updating your programming. Ra called this the Maya. He described it with a combination of humor and genuine acceptance. We are objects moving through space, programmed by the cosmos, and the best we can do is to align with our authentic program rather than a false one. This is a coherent and, within its frame, compassionate vision. But notice its cosmological structure. In this vision, there is no exit from the program. There is only a better or worse alignment with it. There is no concept of gnosis that transcends the planetary conditioning. There is no path to the actual source, the pleroma, the fullness that lies outside the demiurge's creation. There is only differentiation, being more authentically yourself within the system. The Hermetic tradition, which we showed in the previous episode to be structurally isomorphic with Gnosticism, describes the same planetary conditioning, but it also describes a path of ascent through the planetary spheres in which the initiate returns to the gods what each planet implanted at incarnation, giving back to Saturn the capacity for greed and ambition, to Jupiter the thirst for power, to Mars the impulse toward violence, to Venus the appetites, to Mercury the cunning, to the Moon the cycles of growth and decay, and arriving, stripped of all archonic conditioning, at the sphere of the fixed stars, the threshold of transcendence. Human design offers no equivalent path. It offers no ascent. It offers only a better incarnation, and that is not nothing, but it is not everything. Our conclusion on this point: we want to state this directly, as the analytical conclusion states that human design is a sophisticated, internally consistent, and genuinely useful map of the archonic conditioning of the human being. It describes with remarkable accuracy how planetary forces imprint the body, how that imprinting creates patterns of authentic and inauthentic behavior, and how reconnecting to one's true design, rather than one's conditioning, reduces suffering and increases the experience of being authentically oneself. But it is a map of the cage, not a map of what lies beyond the cage. And the most important thing a cage map can do is help you understand that you are in a cage, which then makes it possible to ask whether there is a door. Ra himself hinted at this. He called human design end knowledge, the knowledge you receive at the end of a cycle, not the beginning. He spoke of offering humanity 1,300 years and a chance to discover awareness, to be out of the suffering of what it is to be caught in the Maya. He understood the Maya, the illusion, as the condition. He understood awareness as the response. But in his system, awareness is always body awareness, strategic awareness, the awareness of one's design, not the awareness that stands outside all designs. This may be precisely because the transmission source was the form principle, not the transcendent one. The voice gave Ra an extraordinarily accurate map of the Archonic realm. It could not give him a map of what lies beyond it, because it did not come from beyond it. Part 5. The Tool and the Territory. How to use human design consciously. Now we arrive at the most practically important part of this analysis, because everything we have examined so far leads to a single question. Given all of this, what do you do with human design? And the answer is, you use it with your eyes open. The comparative analysis conducted in this video does not invalidate human design. If anything, it deepens it. Understanding that the BodyGraph is a sophisticated descendant of the Kabbalistic tree of life, that the 9 centers map onto the Sephirot, that the planetary transits are the modern language for archonic conditioning, that the not-self is the Gnostic false personality, does not make the system less useful. It makes it more honest. Because here is what human design does genuinely well. It gives you a language for your conditioning, and that is the first step that every tradition, Gnostic, Hermetic, Kabbalistic, Buddhist, psychological, identifies as necessary. You cannot transcend what you cannot see. The not-self can only be seen when you have a map of what it looks like. Human design provides that map in extraordinary detail. The Gnostic practitioner seeking gnosis still needed to know what the archons had implanted in order to recognize those conditionings and move through them. The Kabbalistic practitioner ascending the tree still needed to know the attributes of each Sephirot in order to engage them consciously rather than being swept along by them. Human design gives you your personal version of this map. How, specifically, the planetary program has shaped your particular body and personality. This is genuinely valuable. Knowing that your open emotional solar plexus absorbs and amplifies the emotional waves of others, and mistakes them for your own. This knowledge changes behavior, knowing that your defined sacral responds to what resonates and what doesn't, and that following that response rather than your mind's rationalizations leads to less suffering. This is experientially verifiable, and it helps people. The question is always, what is this a tool for? If human design is used as a tool for self-reflection, for recognizing conditioning, reducing not-self behavior, and making decisions that create less suffering and more authentic expression, it is, within those parameters, a remarkably effective tool. This is its stated purpose, and it fulfills it. If human design is used as a complete cosmological system that explains your ultimate nature, your relationship to the transcendent, and the full scope of what you are, then it is operating outside its actual domain, and using a cage map as if it were a map of the whole universe will inevitably leave you well adjusted inside a cage. The practice we would suggest, and which is consistent with what the most sophisticated human design practitioners themselves advocate, is this. Use the chart as a mirror. Use it to see your conditioning. Use it to recognize the not-self patterns. Use it to make more embodied, less anxious decisions. And then hold it lightly, because you are not only your design. There is something in you that is reading the chart, not just living it. Something that can hold the map without being the map. That something is what the Gnostic traditions pointed at when they spoke of the pneuma, what the mystics called the witness, what the Buddhist tradition calls the nature of mind. Human design does not give you that, but it can, if used wisely, clear enough of the noise that you begin to hear the silence underneath, the silence that is not the absence of information, but its source. A certified human design analyst, someone trained in the IHDS curriculum, grounded in the mechanics of the system, and at the same time the one that sees beyond the system, can help you use the tool correctly, not as a guru, not as someone who tells you who you are, but as a guide to the map, because the map is complex, and without a guide, it is easy to get lost in its details. What is a defined channel, and what is an undefined center? What does it actually mean to follow your strategy? What does the not-self talk of your specific open centers sound like in your daily life? These are questions a skilled analyst can help you navigate. Our recommendation is to approach a human design, reading the way a sophisticated adult approaches therapy, with genuine curiosity, with a healthy skepticism that never crosses into closed-minded dismissal, with the understanding that any system is a partial view of a larger truth, and with the confidence that you, the one sitting in the reading, are more than any system can fully contain. Use the tool. Know what it is. Know what it isn't. And keep asking the questions it cannot answer. Closing, the cage map and the door. We began with a voice speaking from the interior of the earth in January 1987. We end with a question that the voice by its own nature could not ask. What lies beyond the form? Human design emerged from the intelligence of matter. It maps the material creation with extraordinary precision. It shows you how you are programmed, what is authentically yours within that programming, and how to navigate the program with more grace, less suffering, more authenticity. For millions of people, that has been life-changing, and it is, in the deepest sense, what the Kabbalistic tradition means when it speaks of the purpose of descending into the material world, not to escape it, but to understand it so completely that you can move through it as yourself rather than as its product. But the Gnostic tradition adds one more layer. It says The map of the cage is not the end. It is the beginning. Seeing the cage clearly is what makes the door visible, and the door is not in the map. It is in the one reading the map. There is something in you that cannot be charted, something that was there before the planetary positions at your birth, something that will be there after the neutrino stream falls silent, something that reads the BodyGraph without being reduced to it. That something, whatever you call it, in whatever tradition you inhabit, is where all the traditions we have examined, Gnostic, Hermetic, Kabbalistic, canonical, and perhaps human design at its deepest edges, are pointing, whether you call it the pneuma, the passenger conscious of its own nature, the Ein Sof beyond all the Sephirot, the being, the witness. It is the thing the A I cannot chart. It is the thing no system can fully contain. And it is listening to these words right now.